we've talked about wanting to really understand the Hart family case, and it's one that just really gets to you, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, you see that picture-perfect image they put out there online,
Right.
and then that horrific ending.
Yeah, it's just a lot.
So much to unpack there.
Yeah, I think what I find so fascinating and so disturbing is that contrast, like between that image and the reality.
Mm-hmm.
We've got these sources detailing their life, right?
Right.
We see Jennifer and Sarah Hart adopting these 6 children, relocating from Washington State to California, all over their social media, this picture of this happy, inclusive family.
Yeah, but then you dig a little deeper and...
But then it's like
the cracks start to show.
The cracks start to show.
Yeah, like a house with this beautiful facade.
Right.
But the foundation is just crumbling underneath it all.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you start to see that with those neighbor reports.
Right.
Describing these kids looking distressed.
Yeah.
And then there's that one really sticks out with Devontae Hart. One of the children
with their sons,
coming to the neighbor's door,
yeah,
crying, claiming abuse.
Yeah. And
on top of that,
that's where it's like, okay,
you have these multiple calls to Child Protective Services,
right,
CPS,
and
it seems like
you would think that
barely anything was done.
You would think that would be enough, right, to trigger some kind of more serious action.
Yeah.
And it makes you ask so many questions.
It does.
Like, how could this have gone on for so long?
Yeah.
What were those systemic failures that allowed this to happen? And the sources paint this really disturbing picture.
Yeah.
There were reports of food being withheld as punishment.
Right.
The children wearing the same clothes repeatedly, being isolated from all these normal activities that kids should be doing.
Right. Like that's...
Those are classic science textbook.
Yeah.
Abuse and control.
Yeah. Abuse and control.
God, it just makes you so mad to think about it.
It is. It's infuriating. Yeah.
You mentioned systemic failures. I'm curious, was there anything in the adoption process itself?
Well, that's a really...
Because we know Jennifer Hart.
That's a good point.
Had those previous allegations of abuse against her?
A crucial point. Yeah, the sources do reveal those previous reports of abuse against Jennifer.
Right.
Which, I mean...
It makes you wonder, like...
That should raise huge red flags, right?
Right.
About her fitness as a parent.
Uh-huh.
This wasn't just a one-time thing.
Right.
Like, there was a pattern of behavior here.
Yeah.
And they were still allowed to adopt 6 children.
Yeah. It really makes you wonder if those allegations were investigated properly.
Right, like what kind of breakdowns were happening. Yeah, what were those systemic breakdowns? Yeah, because it's like the system failed these kids.
Exactly.
Even before they came into this family.
Even before, right.
And then you see the family's relocation pattern. They moved multiple times.
Yeah.
And some sources even suggest it was to evade scrutiny.
That's right, to evade from social
services.
To evade scrutiny from the authorities.
Yeah.
And that frequency, I mean... That in itself raises a red flag.
Right.
Like it suggests they might have been trying to stay ahead of those investigations, making it harder to connect all the dots,
Right.
And to build a case.
And then, of course, there's the crash. March 26, 2018.
Yeah.
Their SUV was found.
At the bottom of a cliff.
At the bottom of a cliff in Mendocino County, California.
Yeah.
Jennifer, Sarah, and 3 of the children.
Tragic.
Marcus, Abigail, and Jeremiah were found dead.
Just an awful
It's just almost impossible to even comprehend.
And then initially 2 of the children were missing.
Right.
Devontae and Hannah.
Yeah.
So that just added another layer of mystery and tragedy, right?
To this already horrifying event.
To an already...
The whole nation...
horrifying situation.
Was captivated by that search, hoping against hope that maybe somehow they'd survived.
Yeah.
But then... As the investigation unfolded,
the
truth just became even more disturbing.
It took an even darker turn.
Didn't it?
Yeah, the authorities determined that Jennifer had intentionally driven that SUV
oh my God.
Off the cliff.
Wow.
So it was a murder-suicide.
Jeez.
And I think that really shifted things.
Yeah.
It went from a tragic accident
to
this deliberate act.
Right.
And that just prompted this whole... deeper examination of the family's history and those systemic failures.
It's hard to fathom, It
is.
Like, what kind of desperation could lead someone to do that?
Right.
To choose that as the only option.
As the only way out.
It's devastating.
It is.
And it just forces us to confront these really uncomfortable questions. Like, what warning signs were missed?
Right.
Could this have been prevented?
Yeah. And I think those are the questions that haunt every case like this.
Right.
And while we can't change the past, we can learn from it.
Yeah.
You know, we can dissect what happened.
Right.
Try to understand the motivations, you know, the missed opportunities, and use that to advocate for change.
Yeah.
You know, to prevent these future tragedies.
To make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So let's dig a little deeper into the abuse and neglect that's documented in these sources.
Yeah.
You know, let's really try to understand what these children went through.
Yeah, I think that's important. Yeah, the sources really paint this grim picture of what these kids' lives were like.
Yeah.
I mean, you see these multiple reports of food being withheld as punishment.
It's awful to even think about.
Imagine being a child, you know,
Right.
already so vulnerable, dependent, and having food taken away from you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a cruel form of control.
It's heartbreaking, and it went beyond food, right?
Good.
Like, the sources talk about how the children were often wearing the same clothes day after day, not allowed to participate in, you know, normal activities.
Yeah, things kids should be doing.
Yeah.
It was a systematic pattern of isolation and control.
It's awful.
Jennifer Hart, she wanted to keep these children dependent, afraid, and cut off from any kind of support.
So they couldn't even ask for help.
Right. By denying them those basic needs and experiences.
Yeah.
She was essentially erasing who they were.
Yeah.
Stripping them of their childhoods.
And it's just unbelievable to me.
I know.
That despite all of those calls to CPS. Despite neighbors reporting these children coming to their door.
Right. Seeking help.
Yeah.
Claiming abuse. Yeah. And yet, they still managed to slip through the cracks.
It's like, how is that even possible?
I think it speaks to, I mean, this is a much larger issue.
Yeah.
Right? Like the systemic issues.
Systemic failures.
Yeah, within child welfare.
Yeah.
The sources mentioned the family relocating multiple times, right?
Yeah.
Possibly to avoid that scrutiny.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think, like, how are these cases handled?
Right.
How is this information shared between states? Are we doing enough to follow up on reports of abuse?
It's just so frustrating.
It is. It's infuriating, really.
It feels like there were so many opportunities to step in to protect these kids.
Right. So many missed opportunities.
And then on top of that, you have Devontae and Hannah.
Right. Initially missing after the crash.
Right.
Their bodies were never recovered.
The bodies were never recovered.
You know, for a while, there was that sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd survive somehow. But tragically, authorities concluded that they most likely also died in the crash.
Right, bringing the total number of victims to 6.
And it's a reminder of how devastating unchecked abuse can be.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
Yeah.
If someone had acted sooner, could those kids' lives have been saved?
Right. That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, can we learn from these systemic failures?
Right, from these missed opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, we can't change the past, but we can learn from it. We can advocate for a better future.
Yeah.
You know, the Hart family case, it really exposed those flaws. Right, in the system. And I think we need, you know, better communication between states, more rigorous screening for adoptions, especially when you've got past allegations of abuse.
Right, especially in those cases.
Yeah, and we need a much more robust follow-up on those reports of abuse and neglect.
Absolutely.
It's a multifaceted problem.
Yeah.
And it requires a multifaceted solution.
You had mentioned earlier that authorities discovered more about Jennifer Hart's past during the investigation. What did those sources reveal? You had mentioned earlier that authorities discovered more about Jennifer Hart's past during the investigation. What did those sources reveal?
Well, it showed a pattern of behavior that went beyond just those initial reports. You know, we see these incidents of documented physical abuse, cases where she seemingly used food as like a means of control and punishment. And it's not just negligence at that point. It's deliberate.
It's calculated.
It's a calculated pattern of cruelty.
It's chilling.
It is.
It's chilling to think about the level of manipulation and control, but it also raises questions about the adoption process itself.
Yeah.
If there was this documented history of abuse,
right.
How are they allowed to adopt 6 children?
Yeah, especially...
Some with special needs.
Especially with, some of the kids having those additional needs.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and it really exposes, I think, a critical blind spot in how we evaluate these families, especially the ones who are so good at manipulating their public image.
Right.
It highlights the need for a much more rigorous screening process and deeper dives into their backgrounds.
Yeah, really?
I think we need to be asking tougher questions.
Yeah, you got to look beyond that.
Yeah, looking beyond that facade.
A carefully constructed facade.
So exactly.
And really scrutinize those past behaviors.
Yeah, and with a much more critical eye.
It's a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving.
Oh, absolutely.
The Hart family presented this idyllic, loving image online, but behind closed doors...
A very different reality.
A very different story was unfolding.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder... how many other families might be out there?
Right.
Suffering in silence, hiding behind this carefully crafted mask.
And it makes you feel helpless, right?
It does, yeah.
In the face of such a tragedy.
It's easy to feel that way.
But we can't let fear or uncertainty paralyze us.
Right.
So what can we do?
Well, I think one of the most important things is education.
Okay.
We need to educate ourselves about the signs of abuse and neglect.
Right.
There are resources... online, organizations like Child Help USA, they provide this really detailed information about what to look for, how to report suspected abuse,
right?
And knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
The more we understand those warning signs, the better equipped we are to advocate for those kids in need.
So it's about being informed, being aware of the resources, and just being brave.
And having that courage.
Having the courage to speak up.
To speak up.
If something feels wrong.
Exactly.
We can't rely on the system alone.
Right. It's a collective responsibility.
We have to be their voice.
Exactly.
And beyond that, beyond the individual action,
I think we need to push for larger systemic change. We need stronger child welfare systems. Better communication between states and more robust support for families who are struggling.
Absolutely.
It's not just about punishing abusers after the fact. It's about creating a system that prevents it.
Yeah. Preventing that abuse from happening in the first place. This deep dive into the Hart family case has been...
tough one.
Really tough.
Yeah.
Informative, but deeply unsettling.
Absolutely.
It's a stark reminder that these dark realities can exist.
Behind those seemingly perfect surfaces.
Yeah, beneath that perfect surface. Yeah. And it just really underscores the need for change.
Yeah, big time.
We've looked at the events, the warning signs, those systemic failures, and what we can all do.
Right, what can we do?
To prevent this from happening again.
To prevent these tragedies.
And while this case leaves us with heavy hearts.
Yeah, a lot of unanswered questions.
So many unanswered questions.
I think it also empowers us to be more informed, more vigilant, more proactive.
Right, to protect those who need it most.
Exactly. Let's honor the memory of those children.
Yeah.
By working together to create a world where every child is safe, loved, and free from abuse.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Appreciate it.
We hope this conversation has been insightful.
Yeah.
And more importantly, that it inspires action.
Absolutely.
Remember, knowledge is power. And by understanding these complex issues, we can all make a difference.
Couldn't agree more.
If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into more cases like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like the video if you found the story compelling, and share it with your friends and family who might be interested in true crime and mysteries. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date with all our latest content and join a growing community of curious minds exploring the most fascinating cases. Click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything.